The gunshot that ended Thomas Nelson's life in the dusty street of Independence, Missouri, on a sweltering July afternoon in 1867, also ended any illusion his daughter Theresa had about security in this world. She stood on the porch of their small, weathered house on the edge of town, watching as two men carried her father's body past the general store where he had worked for the past 3 years, since they had arrived from Pennsylvania. Her hands gripped the railing so tightly that splinters pressed into her palms, but she barely felt the pain. At 22 years old, Theresa Nelson had just become entirely alone in a world that showed little mercy to solitary women. The sheriff, a portly man with a graying mustache, approached her with his hat in his hands. "Miss Nelson, I am terribly sorry about your father." The man who shot him was defending his property, and witnesses confirm your father was trespassing on his land, though I suspect it was just confusion about the property lines. "Confusion," Theresa repeated, her voice hollow. Her father had been obsessive about details, meticulous to a fault. He would never have trespassed deliberately. But what did it matter now? He was dead, and the law had already decided the matter was closed. "If you need anything," the sheriff continued awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with her grief. "I need my father alive," she said quietly, then turned and walked into the house, closing the door behind her. The reality of her situation became crushingly clear over the next few days. Her father had left nothing but debts. The house they rented was due for payment in 2 weeks, and the landlord made it abundantly clear he expected his money, or she would need to vacate. She had no family, no prospects, and no means of earning enough to support herself in any respectable manner. Independence was a growing town, bustling with traders heading west on the Santa Fe Trail, but respectable work for unmarried women was scarce and poorly paid. On the 5th day after her father's funeral, Clayton Morris came calling. Theresa had seen him around town, a wealthy landowner in his early 40s who owned several properties in Independence and controlled much of the freight business along the trail. He was not an unattractive man, tall with dark hair touched with silver at the temples, but there was something cold in his gray eyes that had always made her avoid his gaze when their paths crossed. "Miss Nelson," he said when she opened the door, his hat already in his hands. "May I come in to speak with you about a matter of some importance?" She wanted to refuse, but desperation had a way of stripping away pride. She stepped aside and let him enter the small parlor where her father's chair still sat empty by the window. Clayton did not waste time with pleasantries. "I am aware of your unfortunate circumstances. Your father owed money to several people in town, including myself. The house you are living in belongs to me as well." Theresa's stomach dropped. She had not known that. "I was not aware." "Your father was a good man, but not a businessman," Clayton continued, walking slowly around the room as if appraising its contents. "I have a proposal that would solve your problems, Miss Nelson. I am in need of a wife. My first wife died 4 years ago, and a man in my position benefits from having a woman to manage his household. In return for your agreement to marry me, I will forgive all your father's debts and provide you with a comfortable home and security." The words hit her like cold water. Marriage. To this man she barely knew and instinctively distrusted. But what choice did she have? The alternative was destitution, or worse, the kind of work that destroyed women's souls and reputations. "I need time to consider," she managed to say. "You have until tomorrow evening," Clayton replied, placing his hat back on his head. "After that, I will need to collect on your father's debts through other means." After he left, Theresa sat in her father's chair and stared out the window at the dusty street. She could see the merchant shops, the saloon, the hotel where travelers stayed before heading west. Somewhere out there in the vast territory beyond this town, people were living freely, making their own choices. But she was trapped, cornered by circumstances beyond her control. That evening, she walked to the small church where her father had occasionally attended services. The young minister, barely older than herself, listened to her situation with sympathy, but could offer little practical help. "I wish I could tell you there was another way," he said gently. "But without family or means, your options are indeed limited. Perhaps in marriage you might find companionship, even affection in time." But Theresa knew this would not be a marriage of affection. It would be a transaction, her body and service exchanged for survival. The knowledge sat bitter on her tongue. The next day, she gave Clayton Morris her answer. They were married 3 days later in a brief ceremony at the church with only the minister and 2 witnesses present. Theresa wore her mother's old dress, altered to fit her slender frame, and felt like she was attending a funeral rather than a wedding. Clayton's house was indeed comfortable, a large 2-story structure on the better side of town with fine furniture and thick carpets. But it felt more like a prison than a home. Clayton was not cruel, but neither was he kind. He expected her to manage the household, entertain his business associates, and fulfill her wifely duties with the same cold efficiency he brought to his business dealings. There was no tenderness, no warmth, only obligation and transaction. 3 months into the marriage, Theresa felt as though she was slowly suffocating. She moved through her days in a fog of quiet desperation, managing servants she had not chosen, hosting dinners for men whose conversations bored her, and enduring nights that left her feeling empty and used. It was on a crisp October morning that everything changed. Clayton needed cattle moved from a property he owned south of town to his main ranch. His usual foreman was ill, so he hired a cowboy who had recently arrived in Independence with a small herd from Texas. Theresa first saw him when she brought water out to the men working in the yard. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that fell across his forehead beneath his worn hat. When he looked up at her approach, his eyes were the color of the summer sky, bright and clear and startlingly direct. He stood and removed his hat in one smooth motion. "Madam," he said, his voice carrying a soft drawl that spoke of long distances and open spaces. "I brought water," she said, suddenly aware of how formal she sounded, how trapped she must appear in her proper dress with her hair pinned severely back. "That is mighty kind of you, madam." "I am Sam Hayes." "Theresa," she replied, then caught herself. "Mrs. Morris." Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone too quickly to name. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Morris." She should have walked away then, back to the safety of the house and her carefully maintained distance from everything that might make her feel. But she found herself lingering, watching as he drank deeply from the ladle, his throat working, dust streaked across his cheek. "You are from Texas?" she asked. "Yes, madam. Drove cattle up from San Antonio. Hard journey, but the pay is good up here. Do you plan to stay in Independence?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she felt something shift in the air between them, something that made her breath catch. "Was not planning to, but I might reconsider." Clayton's voice from the doorway shattered the moment. "Hayes, I need those cattle moved by tomorrow." "Yes, sir," Sam said immediately, all business. He glanced once more at Theresa, brief and burning, then turned to his work. Theresa fled to the house, her heart pounding in a way it had not since before her father died, since before survival became her only goal. She told herself it meant nothing, that brief exchange, that moment of connection with a stranger. But that night, lying beside her husband in the dark, she found herself thinking about blue eyes and a soft drawl, and the way Sam Hayes had looked at her as if she was a person, not a possession. Over the following weeks, Sam Hayes remained in independence. Clayton hired him for various jobs, and Theresa found herself manufacturing excuses to be outside when he was working, to bring water or messages, or simply to escape the suffocating confines of the house. They spoke in brief snatches, careful conversations under the watchful eyes of other workers, but each exchange felt significant, weighted with things unsaid. Sam told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 18, and spending the past 6 years working various spreads, driving cattle, living free under open skies. She told him about Pennsylvania, about her father, about the dream she had once harbored of becoming a teacher. "Why did you not pursue that?" Sam asked one afternoon when he was mending a fence near the house and she had brought him coffee. "My father died," she said simply, "and I had to survive." He looked at her then with such understanding, such unguarded sympathy, that she felt tears prick her eyes. "Survival is important," he said quietly, "but so is living." "I am not sure I remember how to do that anymore," she admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I think you do," Sam said. "I see it sometimes in your eyes when you look at the horizon, like you are remembering something or maybe hoping for something." She should have denied it, should have retreated back into the safe numbness that had carried her through the past months. Instead, she found herself asking, "What do you hope for?" He was quiet for a moment, his hand still on the fence post. "I hope to have land of my own someday. A place to build something lasting. I hope to have a family, a woman who wants to build that life with me, not because she has to, but because she wants to." The words hung between them, and Theresa felt something crack open in her chest, some carefully sealed part of herself that had shut down when she married Clayton. She wanted that too, she realized. She wanted to be chosen, not needed. She wanted to love and be loved, not simply to survive. "I should go inside," she said, her voice unsteady. "Mrs. Morris," Sam said as she turned away. She looked back at him. "If things were different—" "But they are not," she interrupted gently, though it cost her to say it. "They are not different." She walked back to the house on trembling legs, knowing that something irrevocable had shifted between them, something dangerous and precious and entirely impossible. Clayton noticed nothing, consumed as always with his business dealings and social standing. But Theresa felt the change in herself like a physical presence, a restless yearning that made her nights sleepless and her days an exercise in self-control. She found herself watching for Sam, listening for his voice in the yard, living for those brief moments when their paths crossed and they could exchange a few words. It could not last, and they both knew it. The situation was impossible, hopeless. She was a married woman, and Sam Hayes was an honorable man who would not compromise her reputation or his integrity, no matter what he felt. But honor and intention meant little against the force of what was growing between them. It came to a head on a cold November evening. Clayton had gone to Kansas City on business and would be away for several days. Theresa was alone in the house except for the cook, who had already retired to her quarters. She heard a knock at the back door and found Sam standing there, his hat in his hands, his face troubled. "I am sorry to disturb you, madam, but your horse got loose from the stable. I managed to get her back in, but the latch is broken. I wanted to let you know before I headed back to town." "Thank you," Theresa said. "Let me get my cloak and I will look at it with you." They walked to the stable together through the cold evening air, their breath forming clouds in the darkness. Inside, the horse stood peacefully in her stall, apparently unconcerned by her brief adventure. Sam showed her the broken latch, explaining what repairs would be needed. But when he finished talking, Neither of them moved. They stood in the warm dimness of the stable, surrounded by the smell of hay and horses, and the air between them felt electric with everything they had not said, everything they could not have. "I should leave Independence," Sam said finally, his voice rough. "This is not right, what I feel for you. You are another man's wife." "I know," Theresa whispered, "but I do not feel like his wife. I feel like his property, his possession, something he owns but does not value." "Does he mistreat you?" Sam asked sharply, and she could hear the anger in his voice, the protectiveness. "No," she admitted. "Not in the way you mean. He provides for me, he is not violent, but there is no kindness, no affection. I am simply there to serve a purpose, to manage his household and improve his standing in town. I am so lonely, Sam. I am so very lonely." She had not meant to say it, had not meant to bare her soul so completely, but the words poured out like water from a broken dam. Sam made a sound low in his throat and reached for her, pulling her into his arms. "I should not," he said, even as he held her. "This is wrong." "I know," she said against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and hay and open air. "But I do not care." He pulled back enough to look down at her, his eyes searching her face. "Theresa," he said, her name on his lips for the first time, intimate and precious. "If I kiss you now, I do not know if I can stop. If I start down this road, I will want everything. I will want you to leave him to be with me. I will want a life with you, a real life, built on love, not necessity." Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Then kiss me," she whispered. "Kiss me and let me remember what it feels like to be wanted, not needed, to be chosen, not trapped." He kissed her then, soft at first, tender and questioning, then deeper as she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. It was nothing like the cold, perfunctory kisses Clayton gave her. This was fire and longing and connection. This was what she had read about in books and thought was only fantasy. This was what love felt like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "Come with me," he said urgently. "Leave him and come with me. I do not have much, but I have enough. We can go to California or north to Wyoming. We can start over somewhere he will not find us." "He would come after us," Theresa said, though everything in her wanted to say yes, wanted to flee into the night with this man and never look back. "He would not tolerate the embarrassment, the damage to his reputation. He would hunt us down and the law would be on his side. I am his wife, his legal property." "Then we will fight," Sam said fiercely. "I will not let him keep you in a cage. And what kind of life would that be?" Theresa asked, tears streaming down her face now. "Always running, always looking over our shoulders. I want to be with you, Sam. I want it more than I have ever wanted anything. But I am trapped." Sam pulled her close again, holding her as she cried, his own body tense with frustration and helpless anger. "There has to be a way," he said. "There has to be." But they both knew there was not. In 1867 in Missouri, a married woman had few rights and fewer options. Divorce was scandalous and difficult to obtain, and even if she could somehow secure one, she would be ruined, unable to show her face in polite society. And Clayton would fight it, would use his money and influence to make sure she left with nothing. They stood together in the stable until the cold drove them apart. Sam walked her back to the house, and at the door he cupped her face in his hands. "I love you," he said simply. "I know I have no right to say it, but it is true. I love you, Theresa Nelson." "Morris," she corrected automatically, then shook her head. "No, you are right. I am Theresa Nelson. I was forced to become Mrs. Morris, but in my heart I am still just Theresa. And I love you too, Sam Hayes. I love you, and it is breaking my heart." He kissed her once more, gentle and full of longing, then turned and walked away into the darkness. Theresa stood at the door watching until she could no longer see him, then went inside to her cold, empty house and cried herself to sleep. When Clayton returned 2 days later, he was in an expansive mood, having secured a lucrative contract in Kansas City. He barely noticed Theresa's red-rimmed eyes or subdued manner, too caught up in his success to pay attention to anything else. She moved through the following days like a ghost, performing her duties mechanically. All the life drained out of her, Sam did not return to the house. She learned from the cook that he had taken a job on a ranch outside of town, working for a family named Henderson. It was better this way, she told herself. Distance would cool the feelings, would make it possible to return to the numb survival that had sustained her before. But she had tasted something different now, had felt alive and wanted and loved, and going back to mere survival felt like dying slowly. Winter came early and hard that year. Snow blanketed independence, and the cold drove people indoors. Theresa spent long hours staring out the window at the white landscape, feeling as frozen and barren as the earth. Clayton noticed her melancholy and attributed it to the season, prescribing tonics and suggesting she spend more time in social activities. She tried. She attended church socials and ladies' aid meetings. She hosted dinners and made polite conversation, but she felt disconnected from it all, as if she was watching her life from a distance rather than living it. It was at church on Christmas morning that she saw Sam again. He was sitting in the back, dressed in clean clothes that were clearly his best, his hat in his lap. Their eyes met across the crowded sanctuary, and Theresa felt the impact like a physical blow. All the carefully constructed distance, all the determined forgetting, crumbled in an instant. After the service, as people mingled outside despite the cold, Sam approached. He greeted Clayton respectfully, thanked him for the work he had provided earlier in the fall, then turned to Theresa. "Mrs. Morris," he said formally, but his eyes said everything his voice could not. "I hope you are well." "As well as can be expected," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "And you, I heard you are working for the Henderson family now." "Yes, madam. Good people, good land. They have been kind to me." Clayton, impatient with small talk and eager to greet more important members of the community, excused himself and moved away. For a brief moment, Sam and Theresa were alone in the crowd. "I miss you," Sam said quietly, his voice barely audible above the chatter around them. "Every day, every hour." "Sam, please," Theresa whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "We cannot do this. I know. I am sorry. I just needed you to know that my feelings have not changed. If anything, they have grown stronger." "Mine too," she admitted, the words pulled from her almost against her will. "But it changes nothing." "Does it not?" Sam looked at her intently. "Theresa, I have been thinking about this about us constantly. There has to be a way." "There is not," she said firmly, though it tore at her to say it. "Please, Sam, let it go. Let me go." "I cannot," he said simply. "I will not." Before she could respond, Clayton returned, taking her arm possessively. "Come, Theresa, the Johnsons have invited us for dinner." She allowed herself to be led away, but she looked back once and saw Sam standing alone in the snow, watching her with such longing that it stole her breath. The winter dragged on, cold and bitter. Theresa fell into a depression that no amount of social activity or Clayton's impatient frustration could lift. She lost weight, grew pale, spent hours simply staring into space. The doctor was called and pronounced her suffering from feminine nerves and melancholia, prescribing rest and fresh air. Clayton, alarmed by the potential embarrassment of having an invalid wife, decided to send her to her aunt in St. Louis for a few weeks, hoping the change of scene would improve her spirits. Theresa had not known she had an aunt in St. Louis, but Clayton informed her that he had located her late mother's sister through some business contacts. The journey was arranged for early February, as soon as the weather cleared enough for safe travel. Theresa felt neither excitement nor dread at the prospect, only a dull acceptance. Perhaps distance from independence, from the constant reminders of what she could not have, would help her find some kind of peace. But 2 days before she was scheduled to leave, everything changed. She was in the market, purchasing supplies for the journey, when she heard shouting from the end of the street. A crowd was gathering, and she heard someone say Clayton's name. Her heart lurched, and she hurried toward the commotion. Clayton was in the street, facing off against a rough-looking man she did not recognize. Both men were armed, and the tension in the air was palpable. "You cheated me," the stranger was saying, his hand hovering near his gun. "That land you sold me is worthless, and you knew it." "You signed the papers," Clayton replied coldly. "Your failure to assess the property before purchase is not my concern." "You lied about the water rights," the man shouted. "You knew there was no access to the creek." "Prove it," Clayton said. The man reached for his gun. Clayton was faster, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. The stranger fell, blood spreading across the frozen ground. Women screamed, men shouted, and the sheriff came running. Theresa stood frozen, watching as the sheriff examined the fallen man, then nodded to Clayton. "Self-defense," he said. "Clear case." He drew first. But Theresa had seen Clayton's face in that moment before he fired, had seen the cold calculation, the complete absence of remorse or concern. He had killed a man as casually as he might swat a fly, and the law would call it justified because he had money and influence. That night, as Clayton celebrated his narrow escape with brandy and congratulated himself on his quick reflexes, Theresa made her decision. She could not stay married to this man. She could not spend the rest of her life bound to someone capable of such coldness, such casual violence. Even if it meant poverty, even if it meant scandal and ruin, she had to get out. She slipped out of the house before dawn, taking only a small bag with a few essentials and what little money she had been able to save from the household accounts. The stage to Kansas City was leaving at sunrise, and she intended to be on it. From there, she would go to St. Louis as planned, but she would not return. She would find work somehow, or throw herself on the mercy of this aunt she had never met. Anything was better than staying. She had almost reached the stage depot when a figure emerged from the shadows. Her heart leaped in fear, then recognition. "Sam, what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question," he said, looking at her bag. "Are you running away?" "I have to leave," she said urgently. "I cannot stay with Clayton another day. Yesterday he killed a man, and I saw in his eyes that he felt nothing. I know the law says it was self-defense, but Sam, I cannot be married to someone like that." "Thank God," Sam said fervently. "I was planning to come to you today, to tell you I was leaving independence and beg you one last time to come with me. But I see you have already made your choice." "I am going to St. Louis," Theresa said. "I do not know what I will do there, but I have to get away." "Come with me instead," Sam urged. "I have a job waiting in Abilene, Kansas. A friend of mine has a ranch there and needs good hands. The pay is decent, and it is far enough from here that Clayton will have trouble finding us. I know it is not ideal. I know you deserve better than running away with a cowboy. But I swear to you, Theresa, I will spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy." She looked at him standing there in the gray dawn light, this man who had awakened her heart, who had shown her the difference between surviving and living. Going with him meant giving up any claim to respectability, meant facing an uncertain future with no guarantees. But staying, or even going alone to St. Louis, meant a life without love, without joy, without him. "Yes," she said, the word falling from her lips like a prayer. "Yes, I will come with you." Sam's face transformed with joy. He grabbed her bag with one hand and her hand with the other. "We need to leave now, before anyone sees us. I have 2 horses waiting." They ran through the empty streets of Independence, their breath forming clouds in the cold air, their joined hands the only warmth in the frozen morning. At the edge of town, Sam had indeed prepared 2 horses with supplies for the journey. He helped her mount, then swung into his own saddle. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time. "Once we leave, there is no going back. Clayton will likely pursue us, and you will be considered a runaway wife." "It will not be easy." "I am sure," Theresa said firmly. "I was forced to marry for survival, but you, Sam Hayes, make me want to marry for love, and I would rather face a hard life with love than an easy life without it." He reached across the space between their horses and took her hand. "Then let us ride." They rode hard that first day, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Independence. When night fell, they made camp in a small grove of trees, Sam building a fire while Theresa tended to the horses. They shared a simple meal of dried beef and hard biscuits, sitting close to the fire for warmth. "Tell me about Abilene," Theresa said. "What will it be like?" "It is a cattle town," Sam explained. "Rough and growing fast. The railroad comes through there, so herds come up from Texas to ship east. My friend owns land outside of town, runs cattle and horses. He needs hands, and the pay is good enough that I should be able to save for land of my own in a year or 2. "And what will I do?" Theresa asked practically. "I cannot simply live with you unmarried." "Even in a rough town like Abilene, that would create problems." "We will marry as soon as we can," Sam said. "I know you are still legally married to Clayton, but we are going to a place where no one knows us, where no one knows your history. We will simply be Sam and Theresa Hayes, husband and wife. Unless you do not want my name." "I want it more than anything," Theresa said softly. "I want to be your wife in truth, not just in name." Sam moved closer to her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You already are, as far as I am concerned. Everything else is just legality. In my heart, you are mine and I am yours." She leaned into him, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never felt with Clayton. "I am sorry I have no dowry, no money to bring to you. I am sorry I come to you with nothing but scandal and problems." "You bring me yourself," Sam said, tilting her chin up so she had to look at him. "That is everything. That is all I have ever wanted." He kissed her then, tender and full of promise, and Theresa felt the last vestiges of her old life fall away. She was no longer Theresa Nelson, dutiful daughter. She was no longer Mrs. Clayton Morris, trapped wife. She was simply Theresa, a woman in love, choosing her own path for the first time in her life. They traveled for 6 days, moving steadily west across Missouri and into Kansas. The land opened up before them, vast and rolling, the sky stretching overhead in an endless blue expanse. Theresa had never felt so small and so free at the same time. Sam was an easy traveling companion, patient with her inexperience, teaching her how to care for the horses, how to set up camp efficiently, how to read the weather in the clouds. They talked for hours as they rode, learning each other's histories, dreams, fears. Sam told her about growing up on a ranch, about the hard years after his parents died when he had worked various spreads, saving every penny. Theresa told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's dreams of making a better life in the West, the slow crush of disappointment that had characterized her life in Independence. "No more disappointment," Sam promised. "From now on, only hope and hard work and love." "That sounds like a good life to me," Theresa said. On the 7th day, they reached Abilene. It was indeed rough, a sprawling collection of buildings thrown up quickly to serve the cattle trade. The main street was wide and muddy, lined with saloons, hotels, general stores, and the constant movement of cowboys, cattlemen, and businessmen. Theresa had never seen anything like it. Sam took her directly to a small church on the edge of town. The minister was a young man with kind eyes who asked no difficult questions when Sam explained they needed to be married immediately. "You have witnesses?" the minister asked. "No, sir, just us," Sam said. "Well, my wife and I can stand for you. Give me just a moment." He disappeared into the back of the church and returned with a pleasant-faced woman who smiled warmly at Theresa. "How wonderful! A wedding! We do not get many of those here." The ceremony was brief and simple, nothing like the cold formality of Theresa's first wedding. But when Sam slipped a simple gold band on her finger, a ring he said had been his mother's, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Theresa felt the truth of it in her bones. This was real. This was right. This was love. Sam kissed her in front of the minister and his wife, a kiss full of joy and relief and promise. When they broke apart, Theresa was laughing and crying at the same time. "Mrs. Hayes," Sam said, testing the name, grinning widely. "Yes," she said. "Yes, that is who I am, Theresa Hayes." They spent their wedding night in a small hotel room, nothing fancy, but it might as well have been a palace to Theresa. For the first time, she was with a man who loved her, who wanted her not as a solution to a problem but as a partner, a companion, a beloved. The difference was transformative. Sam was gentle and patient, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and safe. There was no coldness, no transaction, only warmth and connection and a passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, lying in his arms, Theresa felt a peace she had never known. "Happy?" Sam asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "So happy I cannot find words for it," she replied. "I did not know I could feel like this." "Neither did I," Sam admitted. "I thought I was too old, too set in my ways to ever find this. And then I saw you standing on that porch with water for the workers, and everything changed." "You think Clayton will come looking for us?" Theresa asked, the worry that had been lurking at the edges of her happiness finally surfacing. "Probably," Sam said honestly. "He strikes me as a man who does not like to lose what he considers his. But Abilene is a long way from independence, and we will be careful. If he does find us, we will deal with it together." "I do not regret this," Theresa said fiercely. "Even if he finds us, even if there are consequences, I do not regret choosing you." "And I will never give you cause to regret it," Sam promised. "That is my vow to you, more binding than any words we spoke in that church today." The next morning, Sam took her to meet his friend, Daniel Harper, who owned the ranch where Sam would be working. Daniel was a tall, weathered man in his 50s with a wife and 3 grown sons. The ranch was a sprawling operation about 5 miles outside of Abilene, with a large main house and several outbuildings. Daniel's wife, Margaret, took to Theresa immediately, delighted to have another woman nearby. "We have a small cabin you can use," she told them. "It is not much, but it is private and sound. My boys built it a few years back, but none of them wanted to live in it." The cabin was indeed small, just 2 rooms, but it was clean and solid. Theresa looked at the empty space and saw possibility. "It is perfect," she said. "We will make it a home," Sam promised, squeezing her hand. They settled into a rhythm over the following weeks. Sam worked long days on the ranch, tending cattle, mending fences, breaking horses. Theresa worked alongside Margaret, learning to manage a frontier household, cooking for ranch hands, preserving food, and tending the large garden. It was hard work, harder than anything she had done in Clayton's house, but it was honest work. And she was doing it as part of a partnership, not as a servant. In the evenings, she and Sam would return to their little cabin, exhausted but content. They would cook simple meals together, talk about their days, make plans for the future. On Sundays, they would rest, sometimes riding out to explore the surrounding prairie, sometimes simply staying in bed late, wrapped in each other's arms. Theresa felt herself blooming, coming alive in a way she never had before. The fear and depression that had characterized her months with Clayton faded, replaced by joy and purpose. She laughed more than she had in years, and Sam delighted in making her happy, bringing her small gifts, wildflowers from the prairie, a book from town, a ribbon for her hair. "You are beautiful when you smile," he told her one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I never smiled much before I met you," Theresa admitted. "I had forgotten how." "Then I will make sure you never forget again," Sam said, pulling her close. Spring came to Kansas, transforming the brown prairie into a sea of green dotted with wildflowers. Theresa discovered she was pregnant in late April, and the joy of that revelation was almost overwhelming. She had never allowed herself to imagine having children, had never wanted to bring a child into the cold, transactional marriage she had with Clayton. But the thought of carrying Sam's child, of raising a family with this man who loved her so completely, filled her with wonder. Sam was ecstatic when she told him, picking her up and spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Theresa asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Sam said. "You have given me everything I ever wanted, Theresa. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." But their happiness was shadowed by the constant awareness that they were living on borrowed time, that Clayton could appear at any moment to reclaim what he considered his property. Sam took to carrying his gun always, and they were careful about where they went and who they talked to in town. The blow fell on a hot day in June. Theresa was in Abilene with Margaret purchasing supplies when she saw him. Clayton was standing outside the hotel talking to the sheriff, and her blood rang cold. She grabbed Margaret's arm. "That is him," she whispered urgently. "That is my first husband." Margaret, who knew the whole story, paled. "We need to get you out of town immediately." But it was too late. Clayton had seen her. His eyes widened, then narrowed with fury and satisfaction. He strode toward them, the sheriff following. "Theresa," he said coldly when he reached them, "I have been looking for you for months. You have caused me considerable embarrassment and expense." "I am not going back with you," Theresa said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Our marriage is over." "Our marriage is legal and binding," Clayton corrected, "and you are my wife. This man you ran off with has committed a crime, stealing another man's wife. Sheriff, I want him arrested." The sheriff, a lean man with hard eyes, looked uncomfortable. "Madam, is what he says true? Are you legally married to this man?" "I was," Theresa said. "But he kept me as property, not a wife. I left of my own free will. Sam Hayes did not steal me. I chose to go with him." "The law does not care about your choices," Clayton said harshly. "You are my wife, and you are coming back to independence with me." "Over my dead body," said a voice behind them. Sam had arrived, drawn by word that trouble was brewing. He stepped forward to stand beside Theresa, his hand resting on his gun. "She is not going anywhere she does not want to go." "You have no say in this, Cowboy," Clayton sneered. "She belongs to me." "She belongs to no one but herself," Sam said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "And I am her husband now by her choice and by law." "Your marriage is invalid," Clayton said. "She was already married to me. You have been living in sin and adultery." "And what court is going to enforce your claim?" Sam challenged. "You are in Kansas now, not Missouri. You have no power here, no influence. Theresa has made her choice and I am standing by it." The sheriff looked between the three of them, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "This is a complicated matter," he said finally. "I am not sure what the law says exactly in a case like this." "The law says a wife cannot simply abandon her husband," Clayton insisted. "I want her returned to me, and I want this man arrested for alienation of affection at the very least." "I am carrying his child," Theresa said clearly, placing a protective hand on her still flat stomach. "Does that make any difference to the law?" Clayton's face went white, then red with fury. "You whore," he hissed. Sam moved so fast no one saw it coming. His fist connected with Clayton's jaw, sending the older man staggering backward. "You will not speak to my wife that way." "Enough," the sheriff barked, stepping between them. "No more violence." "Look, Morris, I am sympathetic to your situation, but the fact is, this woman clearly does not want to return with you. Forcing her seems like more trouble than it is worth." "I am owed compensation then," Clayton demanded, wiping blood from his split lip. "She stole from me, ran off with household money." "I took only what I needed to travel," Theresa protested. "Perhaps $50 total from household accounts." "You can have your $50, Sam said flatly. "I will give you 100 if you leave her alone and go back to independence." Clayton looked at them both with pure hatred. "This is not over," he said coldly. "I will contest your fraudulent marriage. I will make sure everyone knows what you are. You will be ruined, both of you." "We are already ruined by your standards," Theresa said, finding her courage. "We do not care what society thinks. We care about each other, about the life we are building. You can try to destroy that, but I promise you, Clayton, we will survive. We are stronger together than you could ever be alone with all your money and influence." Clayton stared at her for a long moment, and she met his gaze unflinchingly. Finally, he turned to the sheriff. "This is not finished. I will be in touch with the territorial judge about this matter." He stalked away, leaving Theresa trembling with delayed reaction. Sam pulled her into his arms and she buried her face against his chest. "It is all right," he murmured. "You did beautifully. I am so proud of you." The sheriff tipped his hat awkwardly. "For what it is worth, madam, I think you made the right choice. That man is cold as winter. But I have to warn you, he might make trouble. You should be prepared for that." Over the following weeks, they waited for the other shoe to drop. But Clayton, perhaps recognizing that pursuing the matter would bring him more embarrassment than satisfaction, apparently decided to cut his losses. Word came through Margaret's connections that he had returned to independence and was telling people his wife had died of fever during her travels, a lie that allowed him to maintain his social standing while being free to eventually remarry. "So I am dead," Theresa said when she heard this news. "In a way, I suppose that is true. The woman I was when I was married to him is dead. And you are reborn as Theresa Hayes," Sam said, holding her close. "My wife, my love, the mother of my child." The baby was born in December, a squalling, red-faced boy they named Thomas, after Theresa's father. Sam wept when he held his son for the first time, overcome with emotion. "I never thought I would have this," he said, looking down at the tiny face. "A family of my own." "Neither did I," Theresa said softly, "but here we are." They were here indeed, living in their small cabin, working hard, struggling sometimes but always together. It was not the life Theresa had imagined for herself back in Pennsylvania, not the safe, respectable existence she had thought she wanted. But it was better than anything she had dared to dream. The months turned into years. Sam saved diligently, and in the spring of 1870 he bought land of his own, a beautiful section of prairie with a creek running through it and good grass for cattle. They built a house together, larger than their cabin but still modest, and Sam started his own small herd. Theresa planted a garden, larger than the one at the cabin, and fruit trees that would take years to mature but represented hope for the future. She made friends among the neighboring ranch wives, women who knew hard work and valued strength over social pretension. Thomas grew sturdy and strong, learning to walk in the prairie grass, his laughter ringing out across the open spaces. When he was 3, Theresa gave birth to a daughter, Sarah, a delicate beauty with her father's blue eyes. 2 years after that came another boy, William, completing their family. Sam proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching his children to ride and rope, to respect the land and the animals. But he also insisted they learn to read and write, and Theresa taught them from the few books they owned, determined that her children would have education and choices. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and lean times. But they faced everything together, Sam and Theresa, partners in every sense of the word. They built a life based on love and mutual respect, so different from the cold transaction her first marriage had been. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the real one, the one they counted from that day in the Abilene church, Sam gave her a gift. It was a small painting, done by a traveling artist of their house and family. Theresa looked at it with tears in her eyes. "Look at what we built," Sam said softly, his arm around her waist as they stood together looking at the painting. "Look at what love created." "I was forced to marry for survival," Theresa said, the words she had said to herself so many times over the years. "But you, Sam Hayes, made me want to marry for love. You showed me the difference between existing and living." "You gave me everything," Sam replied, kissing her temple. "A home, a family, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." They stood together watching the sunset paint the Kansas sky in shades of gold and crimson, their children playing in the yard, their life spread out before them like a promise kept. Theresa thought about the frightened young woman she had been in Independence, trapped and desperate, thinking survival was the best she could hope for. She had learned better. She had learned that love was not a luxury, but a necessity, that being chosen was worth any sacrifice, that true partnership meant facing the world as equals. She had learned that she was strong enough to fight for her own happiness, brave enough to risk everything for love. And she had learned that Sam Hayes, the cowboy who had looked at her with clear blue eyes and seen not property or obligation but a person worth loving, was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Years continued to pass, each one adding new layers to the rich life they had built. The children grew, healthy and happy, shaped by the values of hard work and integrity their parents modeled. Thomas showed a gift for working with horses, spending hours with his father learning the subtle language of gentle hands and patient persistence. Sarah inherited her mother's quick mind and love of books, often found reading beneath the cottonwood tree by the creek. William, the youngest, was the adventurer, always exploring the furthest corners of their land, returning with treasures he found and stories he invented. The ranch prospered modestly but steadily. Sam's reputation as a fair dealer and skilled rancher spread, and he was often called upon to advise neighbors or help settle disputes. Theresa became known for her healing skills, having learned from Margaret and experimented with herbs and remedies. Women from neighboring ranches would ride for hours to seek her help with illnesses or difficult births. In the fall of 1875, a letter arrived at the ranch, forwarded from Independence through a circuitous route. It was from the minister who had presided over Theresa's first wedding, informing her that Clayton Morris had died of apoplexy the previous spring. The news felt strange and distant, like hearing about a character in a story rather than someone who had once controlled her life. "How do you feel?" Sam asked when she showed him the letter. "Relieved," Theresa admitted. "Not glad that he is dead exactly, but relieved that he cannot ever try to claim me again, that there is no shadow hanging over us anymore." "There never was, not really," Sam said. "You were always mine and I was always yours, regardless of what any law or document said. Still, it is good to know that even the law would agree now," Theresa said. That evening, they sat on their porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, the sounds of their children getting ready for bed drifting from the house. "Do you ever regret it?" Sam asked quietly. "The respectability you gave up, the easier life you might have had if you had stayed in independence." "Never," Theresa said firmly. "Not for one moment. That easier life was killing me, Sam. I was drowning in respectability, suffocating under the weight of other people's expectations. You gave me air to breathe, space to grow, freedom to be myself. How could I ever regret that?" "I just want you to be happy," Sam said. "I am happy," Theresa replied, taking his work-roughened hand in hers. "I am so happy that sometimes I cannot believe this is my life. I wake up next to you every morning and think about that frightened woman I was, thinking survival was enough, not knowing that love could feel like this." By 1880, their ranch was well established, and they had built a reputation as one of the most respected families in the region. Thomas, now approaching 15, was already being courted by neighboring ranchers hoping to connect their families through marriage to his future. Sarah, at 12, announced her intention to become a teacher, inspired by her mother's devotion to learning. William, at 10, declared he would explore the whole West and write books about his adventures. Sam and Theresa watched their children grow with pride and a touch of melancholy, knowing that soon they would leave to build their own lives. But they took comfort in the foundation they had given them, the security of knowing they were loved, the example of what a true partnership looked like. "They will be all right," Sam said one evening as they discussed Thomas's future. "We raised them to be strong and kind, to value love over convenience, to have courage enough to choose their own paths." "Like we did," Theresa said. "Like we did," Sam agreed, pulling her close. The turning of seasons continued, each year bringing its own joys and challenges. They added a section to the house when Thomas married a quiet, strong-minded woman named Emily from a neighboring ranch. Their first grandchild, a girl named Theresa after her grandmother, was born in the summer of 1883, and Sam became impossibly gentle with her, carrying her around the ranch and introducing her to the horses and cattle as if she could understand his running commentary. "You are going to spoil her," Theresa told him, watching him rock his granddaughter to sleep. "That is what grandfathers are for," Sam replied, not taking his eyes off the sleeping baby. "Besides, I have experience now. I know how fast they grow up, how precious these moments are." Sarah did indeed become a teacher, running a small school on their ranch that served children from surrounding properties. She married a doctor who set up practice in the growing town nearby, and they built a house between the town and the ranch, bridging both worlds. William, true to his word, headed west to explore when he turned 18, sending back letters full of his adventures in Colorado and California. The years accumulated like gold coins, each one valuable, each one adding to the rich treasure of their life together. Sam's hair turned gray, then white, and Theresa's face gained lines that mapped their life together, laugh lines around her eyes, frown lines from worry during hard times, but overall a face that showed a life well lived. In the spring of 1890, on their 20th anniversary, their family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. All 3 children were there with their own families, 6 grandchildren ranging from infant to 7 years old, filling the house with noise and laughter. Neighbors came, friends they had accumulated over the decades, people who had become family through shared hardship and joy. Standing on the porch looking at the gathering, Theresa felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was her life. These were her people. This was what she had gained when she chose love over security, courage over convention. Sam found her there, slipping his arm around her waist in the familiar way that still made her heart skip a beat. "What are you thinking about?" "About that morning in Independence when I ran away," Theresa said. "About how terrified I was, how uncertain of everything except that I could not stay, and about how you were there, waiting, offering me a different kind of life." "Best decision I ever made," Sam said. "Waiting for you that morning, hoping you would choose me." "Best decision I ever made," Theresa echoed. "Choosing love, choosing you." They watched their grandchildren play in the yard, running and shouting, so confident and secure in their world. They had no concept of the desperate circumstances that had brought their grandparents together, the scandalous beginning of their family line. They simply knew they were loved, that they belonged, that they were part of something strong and good. "We did well," Sam said quietly. "We built something that will last beyond us." "We did," Theresa agreed. "We built a family on love instead of obligation, on choice instead of necessity, and it made all the difference." As the sun set over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together for 20 years, Sam and Theresa stood together, still partners, still in love, still grateful for the choice that had brought them to this moment. The cowboy and the woman forced to marry for survival, who had together learned that love was not a luxury but the most essential thing of all. The party continued into the evening, lanterns lit, music playing, generations mixing together in celebration. And at the center of it all, the foundation on which this family was built, were Sam and Theresa Hayes, proof that love chosen freely was the strongest force in the world, stronger than law or convention or the desperate circumstances that had tried to keep them apart. Years continued to accumulate, each one a blessing, each one deepening the bond between them. They aged together gracefully, their love not diminishing but transforming, becoming something richer and more complex with time. They were not just lovers but best friends, partners in every sense, people who had built a world together and populated it with love. When Sam turned 60, he began teaching Thomas more about the business side of ranching, preparing to gradually hand over the main operation, though he would never truly retire. The land was in his blood, and the work gave him purpose. But he made sure to take time, more time than before, to simply sit with Theresa on their porch, talking about nothing and everything, holding hands like young lovers. "I am grateful," he said one evening as they watched another sunset. "Grateful for every day I have had with you, grateful for the family we built, grateful that you had the courage to run away that morning and give us a chance." "I am grateful you were there waiting," Theresa replied. "I am grateful you saw me, really saw me, not as property or obligation but as a person worth loving." "You are the most worth-loving person I have ever known," Sam said. They lived to see all their children settled and happy, to meet 12 grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. They lived to see the 20th century arrive, though they never quite adjusted to some of the changes it brought, preferring their old ways, their tested rhythms. Sam died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1903, at the age of 68, with Theresa lying beside him, her hand in his. She woke to find him gone, his face peaceful, a slight smile on his lips as if he was dreaming of something pleasant. Her grief was profound but not bitter, because she had no regrets. They had loved each other well and completely for 33 years. Not many people could say that. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her family, honored and respected. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Sam, that she was waiting patiently to join him. She spent her days tending her garden, playing with her great-grandchildren, and sitting on the porch watching the sunset, sometimes talking quietly as if Sam was still beside her. She died on a June evening in 1908 at the age of 63, with her children and many of her grandchildren gathered around her bed. Her last words were, "I see him. Sam is waiting for me." They buried her beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, under a sky so blue and vast, it seemed to hold all of heaven. The headstone was simple, just their names and dates, and beneath those, the words Theresa had insisted on years before when they planned such things. She was forced to marry for survival, he taught her to marry for love. Together they built a life worth living. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, each one carrying forward the values Sam and Theresa had established, the foundation of love and partnership they had modeled. Their story became family legend, told and retold, a reminder that courage and love could overcome any circumstance, that choosing the hard path for the right reasons was always worthwhile. And on summer evenings, when the wind blew across the Kansas prairie, and the sunset painted the sky in gold and crimson, people swore they could sometimes see two figures standing on the hill where Sam and Theresa were buried, holding hands and watching the land they had loved together, their love proving stronger than death, stronger than time, eternal as the prairie itself. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on parts of the original land, still told the story of the desperate woman who ran away and the cowboy who loved her, who together proved that the best foundation for any life was love freely chosen, courageously claimed, faithfully maintained. They had started with nothing but each other and built an empire of love that generations would inherit. That was their legacy, not land or money or social position, but the example they set, the proof they provided that love was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any hardship. They had shown that being forced to marry for survival was a tragedy, but choosing to marry for love was a triumph that echoed through time, touching everyone who came after them. And so their story ended, not with tragedy or regret, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well loved, a family well founded. They had faced impossible circumstances and found a way through together. They had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of desperation and fear. They had proved that love, real love, the kind that sees and chooses and commits, was the most powerful force in the world. Sam and Theresa Hayes, the cowboy and the woman who ran away, who found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light, who taught everyone who came after them that love was always worth fighting for, worth running for, worth everything. Their love story, born in desperation and despair, had blossomed into something transcendent, something that would never truly die as long as people told their story and remembered that once, in the wild west of America, two people chose each other against all odds and made that choice the foundation of everything good that came after. And that, in the end, was the happily ever after they had earned, had fought for, had built together with their own hands and hearts. A love that lasted beyond death, a family that carried their values forward, a legacy of courage and commitment that would inspire for generations to come. They had started with nothing but each other and proved that was everything, that love was enough, that choosing each other every day was the greatest adventure and the deepest joy life had to offer.